It is finally time for our main event of the evening. I'm talking a UFC card main evented by two of the best light heavyweights in the world at the time and two former title challengers in Anthony Lionheart Smith taking on the always dangerous Glover Teixeira. Matt, I think this fight is great. I just started the 2-minute timer, but for anybody that's new with Fight Night picks, you know, for a main event, we get the 5-minute timer. So here you go with the 5-minute timer for Smith and Teixeira. Now, Matt, Anthony Smith, since he fought John Jones, decision loss in that fight. Unanimous decision. It wasn't one of the closer fights that we've seen in a John Jones fight of late. Now, I know Jones had the fight against Gustafsson, finished him, takes on Smith, short order. Looked good in that fight, John Jones did. Smith did not, but on his rise, looked absolutely phenomenal from moving from 185 to 205. Then, Smith, kind of in short order again, takes on Alexander Gustafsson in Stockholm, Sweden. It main events a Fight Night card, and he finishes Alexander Gustafsson. And, oh, by the way, Gustafsson retired after that fight. Now, I know he said he might come back, but we haven't seen him back, and there hasn't really been many rumblings of late. So Anthony Smith had that huge win. You'd think, well, maybe with one more win, he gets himself right back into the title picture, but he's been out due to injury. It's a hand surgery that's really caused him a lot of issues. He's talked about it in the media before. Almost like it didn't end his career, obviously, but it was one of those ones that you really had to worry about. And he's coming in here taking on Glover Teixeira, who's on a tidy little win streak. He's won 3 in a row. And against some of the better competition, some up-and-comers as well. And I know we had already mentioned one in the series of videos for this card, but Karl Roberson, one of them, Nikita Krylov, and we're also talking sandwich in the middle, Ion Cutelaba. And that's a guy that's, just a crazy man. So in this one, I'm really looking forward to it. Two guys that can really finish fights in a lot of different ways too. Glover Teixeira, mainly known as a power puncher, but he can really get it done with his jiu-jitsu as well. Great ground game. I know he's 40 years old, which is kind of crazy to think of. Anthony Smith, only 31 coming into this one. And at one point in time, I mean, considered a journeyman at 185 pounds. I mean, he had lost to Thiago Santos. He had lost to Cesar Ferreira at 185. Like, what do you get? At 205, you get a really polished mixed martial artist. I'm excited for this fight. What do you make out of it?
I think this could be a great main event. No matter what, Glover at this point in his career has kind of changed his style a little bit. He goes for a few more takedowns than he used to, and I think he just kind of realized that the older he gets, the less damage he wants to accrue. The problem is Anthony Smith is kind of the perfect fighter for just defending takedowns, getting the fight back up to the feet. And if Anthony Smith can somehow get on top of Glover Teixeira, I think it's going to be a really big problem for Glover. Anthony Smith is some of the more underrated jiu-jitsu in MMA. I know Joe Rogan, you say that about Luke Rockhold all the time, but I think we all know Luke Rockhold's pretty good on the ground at this point. So my new number one most underrated ground game is Anthony Smith. His last 2 wins have been rear naked choke wins over Volkan Oezdemir, who doesn't get the credit he deserves, and Alexander Gustafsson, one of the all-time great 205ers. And a really fun fight before he got the finish. I'm really worried about one thing with Anthony Smith, and a lot of people aren't talking about it, and I find it very interesting. He doesn't take body shots well at all. And I'm not just saying that because Thiago Santos was able to finish him with a body strike. In the Gustafsson fight, I think it was at the end of the second round, Gustafsson lands a body kick, and you could tell immediately that there was pain all throughout Anthony Smith, and he got taken down immediately after. I don't know if that's something that's going to happen to him in every single UFC fight, but when a guy gets hurt to the body in multiple fights, it's something you have to worry about. It's just more people, some people just get hurt to the body a little bit harder than others. I mean, DC's been hurt to the body before multiple times. It just happens to some guys. I think Anthony Smith's kind of in that category. Luckily, Glover Teixeira doesn't throw kicks at all. If he did throw kicks, I would say Glover Teixeira probably wins this fight. That's how much of a night and day difference just that little addition would be, because Glover, like you said, phenomenal boxing. But here's the thing. It's not like he goes to the body a lot with his boxing. And if he does close the distance enough to really get some of those good body strikes off, Anthony Smith's going to get him in a Muay Thai clinch and throw insane elbows at him all night long.
Two really interesting things too here. I mean, Anthony Smith, since he's gone to Factory X, having Mark Montoya in his corner, it's like night and day. This guy is so good. I mean, and Anthony Smith, like you said, kind of a journeyman all of a sudden, and he's right up the top of the division at light heavyweight. And Glover Teixeira, kind of on the flip side of the coin, he is like the Mark Montoya. He's put together a really nice little gym in Connecticut, brought a lot of good fighters in, and he seems to be one of those mentor type guys. Like, even going back a number of years, you can see him in a lot of fighters' corners. He's kind of like, the Michael Johnson, the Mike Brown, what have you.
Burns.
Michael Johnson, even a current fighter that corners a lot of people. Gilbert Burns, Michael Chiesa, a lot of Michaels doing it. But this is one of those fights that, I think stylistically makes a lot of sense. You really get a sense of what's at the top of the division. Glover Teixeira, maybe a little long in the tooth, but he continues to win at the highest level. And Anthony Smith still wanting to prove that he's at the top of the division. And for Smith, again, there's quite a logjam. I mean, when does Thiago Santos come back? Dominic Reyes. You also get Jan Blachowicz. Maybe this fight gives you a sense of, hey, the winner fights one of those guys.
And it's a really good thing that you brought that up. All those other guys you mentioned are going to be very, very hard fights for Anthony Smith. And not to say this one isn't going to be, but they kind of matched him up perfectly in this fight. Glover Teixeira is the best, very beatable guy for Anthony Smith. And I mean that with no disrespect to Glover, but when you look at the guys like a Dominic Reyes, who almost, well, beat John Jones, if you will. A guy like Thiago Santos is able to knock out Anthony Smith in the past. Like, those aren't guaranteed wins. And not saying Glover is a guaranteed win by any means, but it's a much more winnable fight for a guy that you want in the top of the division like Anthony Smith.
Here's where it's a little surprising. Anthony Smith coming in a minus 170 favorite. Glover Teixeira in and around plus 145. On Tapology, I was surprised by the fans voting, but again, you get what you get on Tapology. Out of 230 votes, 88% picking Anthony Smith to win, 69% predicting wins by knockout or TKO. I don't know if I'd go that far. Like you said, clinch work, it's a strong suit of both guys, but Anthony Smith's able to get himself into really advantageous positions, whether he's got his back to the cage or vice versa. He's really able to do quite well. Taking on a bit of a bigger guy, and I mean thicker guy in Glover Teixeira. He's faced big opponents in the past, but Volkan Oezdemir is really a good litmus test. A guy who has really, really heavy hands, a bigger guy for the division. Hard to take down. I know Daniel Cormier's been able to do it, but so is Anthony Smith. And Anthony Smith able to set it up with strikes. I'm not going to go as far as saying Anthony Smith's going to finish him, but I do think Anthony Smith's going to be able to get the win here.
I'll say he finishes him. I really do think he does. I don't think Glover has the cardio to be able to just get beat up by Anthony Smith for round 4 and 5. So at the worst case scenario, Anthony Smith will be able to wear down Glover. And by round 4, if you're exhausted fighting a guy with pretty good cardio who's constantly throwing elbows at you, eventually you're going to fall. And I know Glover's only lost 2 fights by TKO, something Craig and I were talking about before the video even started.
Alexander Gustafsson and Anthony Rumble Johnson.
2 of the most dangerous men ever. Like, regardless of sport or really anything. But he does get wobbled quite a bit in some of his fights. And I think Anthony Smith, he just has such a good killer instinct that if he is even able to wobble Glover for any period of time, he's going to go for the kill immediately, and I think he'll be able to get the finish. I think it's going to be fight of the night, though.
And you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night picks as always, Matt. I mean, we've had 5 minutes for our main event between Teixeira and Smith. We've got 2 minutes for the main card, the prelims, and picks for all 3 UFC cards coming out over the next 8 days. So you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night picks. And as we always say, Matt, let's get into it.